So Jim Nourse, he had a little brief introduction as Judith talked about a recent experience and then the following experiences of that. A little bit more about Jim, and then I'll turn it over to him. Dr. Jim Nourse has been in private practice since 1980. For 5 years, he served as staff psychologist and director of clinical psychology training at the Hampton, Virginia VA Medical Center, and as assistant professor of psychiatry and behavioral sciences at the Eastern Virginia Medical School. He earned a doctorate in clinical psychology from the University of Tennessee. Jim is an acupuncturist and a graduate of the Zhong Dao, I hope I pronounced that right, School of Classical Chinese Medicine. Jim has learned meditation practices from various teachers, both lay and monastic, and currently describes his work one-on-one with individuals as spiritual mentoring. I love that phrase. He's the author of the books Opening the Aloha Mind and Simple Spirituality, Finding Your Own Way. You can find out more about Jim at jamesnourse.com. I'm very honored that Jim's been involved in our work at the center from the time of our founding, and so glad that you agreed to be with us this afternoon, Jim. So please, share what you have brought.
Thanks so much, Rob. May I yield the remainder of my time to Yeshua? It really is an honor to be a part of this esteemed panel, and I really appreciate what's been given so far. It's been food for thought and contemplation for me, and I shall take this into my own depths and reflect on it for a long time. I'm not sure that the coronavirus is a teacher either, per se, but I do feel like there is some sort of teaching happening. And in thinking about this whole thing, I'm led to believe that the wisdom teacher concept is inherently relational. And I wrote this little aphorism. If a wisdom teacher says something in the forest and there is no one to hear it, does it still sound wise? I think that there has to be a student, and the student has to be on the verge of being ready to hear something, or in fact being ready to hear something to elevate his consciousness, or else the wisdom teaching will fall on deaf ears and might as well not even exist. So this is the meaning, I think, of when the student is ready, the teacher appears. There has to be a student in readiness for a wisdom teacher to come about. And I think it remains to be seen whether some kind of critical mass of our populace are students in that sense, and whether we can receive the wisdom that is inherent in this time. If we see the virus as only something that we need saving from, that we had better find a vaccine for sooner rather than later, if we see it as a hoax, then there's no wisdom teaching that's going to come forth that's going to impact us. On the other hand, if we see it as being a stimulus for insight, for reflection, for clearing our perceptions of self and world, for facing our shadow, as has been mentioned by several here today, and contemplating our higher potentials, then we may have a wisdom teacher showing up in our midst. One of Judith's teachers, her earliest spiritual teacher, Paul Solomon, used to tell a story about mystery schools. And he said in the mystery school, when a student would come for instruction, the teachers would make an in-depth study of that person and would determine what their strengths were and where they needed perhaps some remediation. And he gave the example of a student who had a green thumb but had very little patience. And this student would be assigned to a bonsai master. And the bonsai master would give this student the assignment of working with a little pine tree that had been set out in the sun too long, and the needles had become burned. And the assignment would be for that student to take tweezers and remove those pine needles one at a time and put them in an urn. And of course, this would be very trying to the patience of a young student who wanted to become a bonsai master. And if they gave in to that impatience and fed it and nourished it and got frustrated, that student would be reassigned to a very old bonsai master with many more years experience. And this bonsai master was someone who spoke very slowly and precisely. And this student who had a challenge with patience would be sent on a long journey with that person. So in this example, I think that wisdom teachers are very frequently the wisdom teacher knows that for true transformation to take place, we almost have to be ambushed. We have to be jolted out of our customary security equations. And so in that sense, if we choose to be students at this time, we can certainly use the coronavirus as a teacher, as an opportunity to listen, to pause, to reflect at a deep level. Judith spoke of the two knocks, and I was thinking that the wisdom teacher, the COVID as a wisdom teacher, might most closely resemble a Zen teacher, or perhaps one of these teachers of the Toltec tradition. Many of you may have read Carlos Castaneda's books back in the 60s and 70s. And Carlos Castaneda was a cultural anthropology student who apprenticed himself to a Yaqui Indian medicine man named Don Juan Matus. And Don Juan was always confounding Carlos's sense of reality and certainly his sense of security. And Zen teachers are famous for this also. There's a story of a Zen teacher who had taught his student how to meditate by simply observing the breath. And after a couple of weeks, the student came back and said, this observing the breath is just boring. You know, there's got to be more to it than this. And the teacher says, oh, boring. Huh? Okay, I'll fix that. Come with me. And they go for a walk down to the river. And the teacher wades out into the river, and the student is, you know, a little bit wary of this. And the teacher says, no, trust me. Come here. You know, I'm not going to hurt you. And so the student obediently wades out into the river, and the teacher grabs him by the cowl and dunks him and holds him down there. And finally, before he, you know, really starts sputtering, he pulls him up, and, you know, the guy shakes himself off. He said, what did you do that for? Teacher said, your breath got really interesting, didn't it? So, wisdom teacher, very possibly. I want to read you a quote that I found from Chris Cuomo. Actually, this was in the New York Post. And you may know that Chris Cuomo is a commentator on CNN. And this is the article, an excerpt from the article. Was Chris Cuomo fully recovered from his fight with COVID-19 when he took to the air on Monday? He used his Sirius XM show to vent about his role as CNN anchor and said that his battle with coronavirus had made him rethink his values and question his position as a public figure. He said, "I don't like what I do professionally. I don't think it's worth my time." Cuomo said he missed the freedom to tell his critics to go to hell, saying that matters more to me than making millions of dollars per year because I've saved my money and I don't need it anymore. Speaking about his job as host of CNN's Cuomo Prime Time, he said he doesn't want to spend his life, quote, trafficking in things I think are ridiculous, like talking to Democrats about things I really don't believe they mean, and talking to Republicans about them parroting things they feel they have to say. Cuomo concluded, "I'm basically being perceived as successful in a system that I don't value. I'm seen as being good at being on TV and advocating for different positions, but I don't know if I value those things. Certainly not as much as I value being able to live my life on my own terms." Now, that commentary is a little bit rough. It's a little bit New York, but I think it shows what's happened in the context of this virus to one person who has been called to reflect upon the life that he's been living and how it doesn't measure up to the values that he really holds sacred. This kind of disconnect that Panyawati is talking about. All right, I see that I've used up my time, so I will let it rest there. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jim. You're reminding me that one of the things that reality in its many forms can do is disillusion us. And all the great wisdom teachers talk about the value of disillusionment when they're, first of all, any illusion is keeping us at distance from fullness of reality. But some of our illusions really need to die so that some greater wisdom can come in. And I'm not sure you were pointing to that, but thank you. Thank you for all your words and that helpful reminder.